Why did they laugh at her, when her silence was the one thing keeping her steady? The training field shimmered beneath the weight of midday heat, the dirt packed hard enough to gleam like metal under boots. Recruits shifted restlessly in loose formation, muttering, jeering, their voices cutting sharper than the whistles that marked their drills. She heard them all. She always did. She's just the Mortar girl. The sneer drifted across the pit where knelt, both hands resting on the cold steel of the tube. She didn't look up. She didn't need to. She had long ago learned that silence cut deeper than reaction. Her palms steadied the base plate, fingers adjusting it by a fraction, the way one might align a compass needle to the unseen pull of the earth. To the others, it was nothing. Just a pointless motion, just a recruit pretending her work mattered. But knew better. Accuracy wasn't performance. It was survival. And though no one here could see it yet, survival was the one language she spoke fluently. Boots scuffed closer. A pebble flicked into the pit, skittering against metal before settling in the dust near her knee. Another burst of laughter. Careful now, Mortar girl, don't chip a nail. The sound was brittle, sharp, the kind that could fracture a spirit if repeated often enough. Let it wash over her. She kept her breathing measured, rhythm precise, the same way she had once measured seconds between heartbeats under the pressure of something far worse than ridicule. Above them, an instructor's shadow stretched long. Major Rowan stood with arms folded, his presence carved into the ridges of the field. His eyes narrowed not at the recruits, not even at the mockery that filled the air, but at her. He'd seen this before. Recruits cracking under pressure, stumbling when laughter or cruelty pressed down on them. But she didn't. Not once. Her composure was too exact, her focus too deep. It was the stillness of someone who had been here before, not in a training ground, but in something far more dangerous. The jeers rose again, rolling across the heat, but's gaze never shifted. Her breath matched the weight of her hands on the tube, the slow rhythm of her heart, steady as a metronome. Then, as if to punctuate her silence, a dull thump shook the ground nearby. A misfire. One of the other crews scrambled, shouts scattering through the haze of smoke and grit. A spray of dirt fell over her shoulders. Gasps and curses filled the air. Simply adjusted the mortar's angle, a small correction, her fingertips brushing against grooves she knew as if by instinct. No panic, no hesitation. His jaw tightened. That wasn't the movement of a green recruit, that was reflex. The laughter thinned, uncertainty seeping in. Still, one voice lingered, brittle with false confidence. Pathetic. She acts like this is real soldiering. For the first time, moved. His boots struck hard against the dirt as he stepped forward. Silence rippled outward. Recruits stiffened. His voice cut through the heat like a blade. Stop it. Every head turned. Remove your jacket. The words fell heavy, absolute. For the first time that day, hesitated. Not much. Not enough for the others to notice, perhaps, but caught it. Her hand froze on the seam of her uniform. The air seemed to still, the field holding its breath. Slowly, reluctantly, she pulled at the fabric. Dust clung to the cloth as it peeled away, inch by inch. And then light struck metal. A gleam, not a badge of training, not a ribbon meant for ceremony, something else. A metal, older, darker, edged with symbols none of the recruits recognized. The laughter that had moments ago filled the field collapsed into silence. Every face turned, wide-eyed, uncertain of what they had just seen. His gaze sharpened. He knew enough to recognize what shouldn't exist. He had seen commendations, he had handed them out himself, but this was different. Adjusted her jacket, tucking the metal back into shadow as if it meant nothing at all. She straightened, dust streaking her hands, eyes calm. The recruit stared, whispers trembling at the edges of the silence. But before questions could form, the siren wailed. A sharp, piercing alarm that cut through the camp with urgency, unlike any drill. Recruits jolted, twisting toward the horizon. The tone rattled through their bones, high and relentless. Not a signal for practice, not a test, This was danger. Boots pounded against dirt as instructors shouted, scrambling to herd trainees into formation. But order crumbled almost instantly. From the far edge of the camp, a black column of smoke rose into the sky. Thick, acrid, undeniable. The munitions sheds. His eyes narrowed, her jaw clenched. She scanned the chaos, the fire swelling, recruits scattering. She didn't wait for permission, she never had. Form on me, her voice cut through panic like steel. Tighten the line, hold the ground, or the fire will take it. The sound of her command startled them. Some turned instinctively, and in the absence of confidence from their instructors, they obeyed her. Recruits grabbed sandbags, stumbled toward her line, their fear replaced by urgency. Dropped low, muscles straining as she hauled a sack herself, dragging it into place. Heat rolled over them, the crackle of fire swelling into a roar. Major should have stopped her, should have reasserted his command, but he didn't. He watched, because he knew. Her stance, her orders, the calm in her voice. This was not the first fire she had ever faced. It was the reflex of someone who had lived inside chaos and survived. And he wondered, what kind of soldier hides a medal like that? What kind of past does she carry, buried beneath silence? And what would it mean when the truth finally surfaced? How did the recruits go from mocking her to following her into fire? The siren still howled across the ridges, its shriek climbing over every other sound. Heat pressed in from the munitions sheds as flames clawed upward, smoke twisting like black snakes into the sky. What had begun as a drill was now survival. Recruits stumbled in disarray, some frozen in panic, others scattering without orders. The instructors barked commands, but their voices cracked under the weight of the alarm. It was chaos until her voice cut through it. Grab sandbags, build the line here. His tone was clear, clipped, unshakable. It carried the weight of certainty, and certainty was rare currency in panic. The first few hesitated, then one obeyed, then another, and soon half a dozen recruits dug their hands into the earth, hauling sacks heavy with grit. Bent with them, straining under the same burden, her shoulders trembling but steady, her eyes fixed on the fire line. The first wall took shape under her command. Waded into the smoke, barking his own orders. Back, this area is compromised. But his voice landed on ears already tuned to hers. He stopped short, jaw clenched as he realized what he was seeing. She wasn't improvising. She was directing with precision. She was placing sacks where wind would turn sparks. She was anticipating collapses before they happened. Each motion came too quick, too exact to belong to a novice. And the recruits, those same voices that had laughed only an hour ago, now mirrored her movements as if she had always been their officer. Another explosion rattled the ground. A crate inside the first shed cracked, sending sparks scattering like stars across the dirt. Lunged low, pressing a sandbag hard into a patch of burning grass, smothering it before it could spread. She barked over her shoulder. Stay low, heads down, keep stacking. Her words threaded focus through their fear. His gut twisted. He wanted to drag her out, remind them all who held the rank. But every second she held the line was another second the camp survived. He couldn't deny the evidence before him. The flames spat higher, heat driving sweat into their eyes. Snapped open a flare, throwing it between the fire and her recruits. A wall of crimson smoke billowed, curling across the field. That's our shield. Stay behind it. Coughing, recruits pressed on, guided by the haze. Their fear hardened into grit. Their jeers had been burned away. Now there was only obedience. Shoved through the smoke until her silhouette emerged before him, backlit by fire. His voice cracked against the roar. What the hell do you think you're doing? Her reply was sharp, unflinching. Saving your camp. For a moment time seemed suspended, his authority her defiance, both clashing in the thick smoke. And yet the ground told its own truth. The recruits weren't fleeing anymore. They were holding. Then a shout ripped across the field. The flames are reaching the second row. Didn't wait for permission. She raised her arm, rallying a cluster of recruits. Split the line. Half with me, half hold the wall, move. They followed without hesitation. His fists tightened. It was wrong. Insurrection by the book, but even he could see it. Without her, they would have no line at all. The fire roared louder, sparks cascading across the yard. Rolled a sandbag across another flare-up, stomping it flat, her throat raw as she shouted. Cut it here, don't let it jump. And they listened. Young soldiers who had ridiculed her only hours ago now mirrored her defiance, their movements stiff but resolute. Another blast rolled out of the sheds, slamming heat into their faces. Staggered but did not fall. She braced a younger recruit behind her, shielding him from debris. The boy's eyes widened, stunned that she would stand between him and fire. His chest ached. She wasn't just steady, she was leading like someone born in battle. His memory flicked back to the metal he'd glimpsed under her jacket, symbols carved into forbidden steel, the kind of emblem that belonged to a past erased from official record. Phantom Legion. He had heard whispers, a unit wiped clean from history, their operations buried in files redacted to nothing but black ink, soldiers who disappeared as if they had never lived. And yet, here she was. His radio hissed with frantic voices, reinforcements finally scrambling from the far side of camp, but he barely registered them. His eyes stayed locked on. She shouted again, voice breaking but fierce. Hold your ground. The wall holds or the camp falls. It wasn't desperation. It was conviction. The kind of conviction that could drag exhausted recruits back to their feet when their bodies wanted to collapse. And it worked. The line held. Hour by grinding hour, sandbags slammed into place. Smoke thickened, but the flames bent back. Reinforcement crews arrived with hoses, axes, extinguishers, but even they looked to her for direction. Where's the weak spot? One firefighter shouted, and pointed without hesitation, voice hoarse but clear. There, shore the wall now. No one questioned her, not even the professionals. Felt the ground shift beneath him. Authority that should have been his was bleeding toward her like water through cracks. He clenched his fists, torn between outrage and reluctant awe. The fire finally began to shrink. The acrid smoke thinned, curling upward as the last sheds collapsed in heaps of blackened timber. When silence finally returned, the recruits slumped against shovels and sandbags, their bodies trembling from exhaustion. But their eyes, every one of them, turned to her. Stood at the front of the line, soot streaking her cheeks, shoulders squared, breathing steady despite the ache in her chest. She looked less like a trainee than a commander surveying the aftermath of battle. And the recruits knew it. The jeers were gone. In their place was silence edged with awe. The mocking name they had once given her, Mortar Girl, was gone too. Major stepped forward, his boots heavy against the churned ground. He stopped just in front of her, close enough to see the ash clinging to her lashes. His voice was low, sharp. In my office now. The recruits exchanged glances. She didn't argue. She gave one last instruction to the nearest soldier. Check the wall, make sure no gaps remain. Then she followed without hesitation, leaving whispers curling in her wake. The camp was but standing. The fire was out, but something else had been ignited. And knew as he walked beside her, what had just sparked today would burn longer, hotter, and far more dangerously than any blaze. Why didn't she deny it? The office door closed with a snap that sounded too final. The hum of generators outside filled the silence, the faint smell of smoke still clinging to their uniforms. Stood rigid, her back straight, her hands still at her sides. Soot streaked her sleeves, ash dusted her boots, but her composure had not cracked. Major circled slowly, eyes raking across every detail of her stance. He wasn't angry, not exactly. He was calculating. You're going to explain, he said, his voice iron. Her gaze flicked up then down again. "Explain what, sir?" "Don't," snapped. His jaw tightened, the cords of his neck drawn. "You commanded out there like an officer. You kept them alive when panic should buried them. And then there's this." His hand jabbed toward her chest, where the metal had glinted like a wound in the sunlight. "I saw it. Don't insult me by pretending it was nothing." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Her fingers curled slightly, barely perceptible. For a moment she looked as if she might try to hold the mask, but then her voice broke through, quiet, steady. "You're mistaken." Slammed his palm on the desk, the crack of wood ricocheting off the walls. "Enough. I've served long enough to recognize what I saw. That insignia doesn't exist. Not officially. Not anymore, but I know it." His voice dropped to a near growl. "Phantom Legion." The name hung in the air like a forbidden word. Heavy, dangerous. Silence was confirmation enough. She didn't flinch. She didn't nod. But her lack of denial was more damning than any admission. Leaned closer, searching her eyes. "Who are you? And how the hell did you end up here, hiding in plain sight?" Her jaw tightened. The stillness stretched long enough that his hand clenched into a fist. Then finally she spoke. "I didn't come here to lead," she said softly. "I came here to disappear." The words landed like stones in a well, rippling through him. To disappear. Soldiers didn't vanish by accident. Not ones carrying medals erased from records. His pulse pounded. He had read fragments about the Legion, always redacted, always vague. Stories of soldiers trained for missions no government would admit to. They were ghosts, made to do the kind of work no one wanted in daylight. And when their usefulness ended, their names ended with it. If she was one of them, then her presence here wasn't just a curiosity. It was a danger. He stepped back, dragging in a breath. "This isn't over. You may think you can hide among recruits, but after today, everyone saw, they'll talk, and command will listen. I'm not the only one who recognized what you are." His chin lifted slightly, defiant in the quiet. But before she could reply, the office door swung open. Lieutenant strode in, grime still streaking his face from the fire. His eyes locked on her instantly. He froze, breath catching in his throat. "It's her," he whispered. Snapped toward him sharp. "That's enough." But his eyes never left. His voice grew stronger, tinged with awe and fear. "That insignia, I saw it. I remember it from years ago, a briefing I wasn't supposed to attend. They said the unit was gone, wiped out, every last one." His breath hitched. "And yet you're standing here." His face remained impassive. Her voice was low, controlled. "You should forget what you think you know." Laughed harshly, disbelief cutting through his exhaustion. "Forget? How do you forget a ghost walking into your camp?" His hand slammed against the desk again, silencing him. "I said enough, out." But lingered, his eyes burning into his face. "The Legion isn't dead," he whispered. "And if she's here, then nothing they buried ever stayed buried." Then he turned, storming out, the door slamming behind him. Silence swelled again, heavier now. The expression was carved into grim lines, remained unmoving though her thoughts spun like shrapnel. If recognized her, others might too. Her cover was already fraying. Exhaled sharply, packing. "This is spiraling. If spreads his story, command will descend on us. And when they do, they won't just ask questions. They'll drag you back into the shadows you came from." His voice was steady, though her chest felt like stone. "Then I'll do what I've always done. Adapt, survive." Stopped, staring at her, frustration etched in every line of his face. "You're not making this easy for either of us." Outside, the camp stirred, voices rising in restless clusters. Recruits whispered her name, now not with mockery, but with something different, something dangerous. Could feel it even through the walls, the shift in how they saw her. No longer invisible, no longer dismissed. Her silence had kept her safe, but the fire had stripped it away. Moved to the window, his silhouette hard against the dim light. "They'll come for you. You can walk into it or you can run. But either way, this isn't staying buried. Her jaw clenched. She looked past him out into the smoky yard. Recruits moved like shadows among the ruins, repairing what could be salvaged. She saw their faces, their eyes when they had turned to her during the blaze. Trust she hadn't asked for. Loyalty she hadn't wanted. It pressed down heavier than any metal. She had come here to vanish, to bury the ghosts that chased her, and yet every step she took seemed to make the shadows louder. She whispered, almost to herself, "Hiding doesn't save you forever." Turned sharply, "What was that?" But said nothing. She straightened, her shoulders squared, a soldier's mask firmly back in place. The fire outside had been extinguished, but new, something else had been lit, a blaze that no water could smother. And stood at its center. Why did silence suddenly feel heavier than speaking? The camp had quieted after the fire, but not in the way had hoped. Ash drifted on the breeze like snow, coating boots, settling into the cracks of ruined sheds. Recruits moved in clusters, their voices low, their glances restless. They worked with shovels and buckets, repairing, cleaning. But the work was a disguise. The real activity thrived in whispers. Her name. They repeated it as though it had taken on a new shape. No longer a name for ridicule. Now it lingered with weight, curiosity, even reverence. Every time she walked past, conversations faltered. Eyes followed her, some wide with awe, some tight with suspicion, none dismissive anymore. Kept her head down in the barracks, hands clasped between her knees, the faint scent of ash still clinging to her uniform. She felt the stares even when she didn't meet them. Some recruits whispered openly. How did she know? Others muttered only fragments, half afraid of the answer. Disappearing, she realized, had become impossible. The door slammed open. Major filled the threshold, his presence sharp enough to slice the murmurs in half. "Outside," he ordered. Rose without a word. The recruits parted for her as she followed him out into the morning light. The camp stretched quiet before them, smoke still curling faintly from charred ruins. Stopped near the parade ground, his jaw set like stone. "Filed a report," he said flatly. "He claims he saw the insignia. I shut him down, but it won't hold. Someone higher up will come sniffing." His face betrayed nothing. Her voice was even but low. "Then let them." "That's not an option," snapped. "You don't understand. Phantom Legion isn't a name to throw around. It was erased for a reason. If they believe one of its ghosts has reappeared, they'll tear this camp apart to confirm it." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "So what's your plan, Major? Hide me, hand me over." His silence was answer enough. The tension hung between them until voices carried across the yard. A group of recruits jogged past, saluting, but their eyes slid toward. One of them muttered just loud enough for her to hear. "Legion." The word struck like flint on steel, a spark she could not extinguish. By afternoon, whispers had hardened into rumor. By evening, rumor had become certainty. She felt it everywhere, the weight of unasked questions pressing in on her from every angle. And then as dusk fell, the messenger arrived. Dust coated his boots, his uniform stiff from the road. He carried a sealed envelope marked with the insignia of Central Command. Broke the wax seal in private, but when was summoned, she could read the verdict in his face before he spoke. "They know," he said simply. "Headquarters receives report. They're sending an envoy tomorrow. They want you brought before them for questioning." Didn't flinch. She asked only one question, "And if I refuse?" Stare was hard. "Then they'll come for you anyway, and they won't be gentle." Her jaw tightened. She turned her gaze toward the horizon where smoke still stained the sky. For years she had outrun her past by staying quiet, but silence was no longer a shield. When dawn broke, the camp was taut with tension. Soldiers lined the parade ground with posture than usual, eyes darting toward the road cutting through the hills. Word had spread, the envoy was coming. Not rumor, not possibility, certainty. Walked out of the barracks into their stairs. Her uniform had been cleaned, though faint smudges of ash still clung to the cuffs. Conversations died the moment she stepped outside. Recruits parted instinctively, not with mockery but with silence heavy as stone. At the flagpole waited. He hadn't slept. She could see it in the shadows beneath his eyes, but his stance was rigid, unyielding. When she approached, he leaned close enough that only she could hear. They'll try to break you fast. Authority, intimidation, maybe worse. Whatever you say will decide what happens to you and to this camp. Her voice was low, firm. And what if silence is the only thing that keeps me alive? Before he could answer, engines growled in the distance. A convoy crested the hill. Dark vehicles rolled in formation, dust rising in their wake, sunlight glinting off armored steel. The sound of them pressed against the camp, making the ground itself seem smaller. The lead car stopped at the parade ground. Its door swung open. Colonel Sloan stepped out. His uniform was immaculate, every crease pressed sharp. His insignia gleamed in the muted light. His reputation preceded him, a man known for uncovering secrets no one wanted unearthed. His gaze swept the camp, pausing only briefly before settling like a blade on. He didn't bother with introductions. He raised a hand, beckoning. "Bring her forward." Two soldiers from his escort moved instantly, but stepped into their path, his voice sharp. "She walks on her own." Sloane's gaze flicked to him, then back to. A faint smile ghosted his lips. "Very well, let's hear from the woman who saved your camp." Every step took toward him echoed against the packed dirt, louder than it should have. The camp held its breath. Recruits craned their necks, straining to see. Sloane studied her like a specimen under glass. "You wear the face of a recruit," he said evenly. "But reports tell me you commanded yesterday like someone who's seen fire before. And then there's the matter of an emblem." His eyes narrowed. "Lift your jacket." The parade ground froze. Hesitated, just for a heartbeat. Then she unfastened the top button, pulling the fabric aside. The metal caught the light. A flash of forbidden steel. Symbols etched in lines too sharp, too intricate to belong to anything ordinary. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Sloane's expression hardened. Phantom Legion. The name lives only in classified files, and even there redacted to nothing. That program was dismantled. No survivors. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a blade's whisper. "And yet here you are." His heartbeat drummed against her ribs. Her voice, when it came, was calm. "I didn't come here to be found. I came to serve quietly, to vanish into ranks where no one would care." "Impossible," Sloane said. "Men don't follow ghosts unless the ghost still breathes power. Yesterday they followed you." Whispers stirred across the ground. Recruits shifted uneasily. Their faces reflected something new. Not doubt, not fear, conviction. His fists clenched at his sides. He said nothing. Sloane tilted his head, circling her. "You have two paths. Admit who you are and return with me, your history dragged into daylight. Or deny it and watch me dismantle this camp to uncover the truth myself." Lifted her chin. "You mistake me for a threat. I'm not here to resurrect the past." "Every ghost is a threat," Sloane said softly, "especially one that still commands the living." The silence pressed in, and then from the ranks of recruits a voice cracked the air. It was one of the younger ones, the boy she had pulled to his feet during the fire. His voice trembled but carried clear. "She saved us. If she hadn't taken charge, half of us would have burned. You weren't here, we were." The silence that followed was thicker than smoke. Sloane's eyes flicked toward the boy, then back too. His expression was unreadable, but his words carried the weight of judgment. "So that's it. They already believe. Whether you like it or not, the Legion lives through you." His jaw tightened. "Enough. If command wants answers, you take them from me, not from someone who earned this camp's respect by saving lives." But Sloane only smiled faintly. "Respect is fickle, fear is permanent, and fear will decide how this ends." He turned back to gaze like iron. Tonight you come with us. If you resist, I'll ensure this entire camp is punished for your defiance. The recruit stiffened. Outrage flickered across faces, but raised a hand, silencing them. Her voice carried clear across the yard. If going with you keeps them safe, I'll go. The words landed heavy. His head snapped toward her, disbelief sharp in his eyes, but she held his stare calmly. Sloane's smile widened, cold, wise. The order was given. At dusk, the vehicles growled to life again, engines rumbling like predators. The recruits watched in silence as walked toward the convoy. She gave them no sign of fear, only the same steadiness she had shown when fire raged around them. When the door slammed shut behind her, felt something twist in his chest. The recruits looked to him, their faces searching for direction. His fists opened and closed, responsibility pressing down like iron. And though the convoy carried her into the night, he knew one thing with certainty. The fire had not ended. It had only changed shape. Why did the ride feel more like a sentence than a journey? The convoy rumbled through the night, engines low and steady, headlights carving harsh lines across the dirt road. Inside the armored transport sat strapped against cold steel, wrists free but movement watched closely. Two soldiers sat opposite her, rifles slung across their chests, eyes fixed forward. Silent, obedient. Colonel Sloane rode in the next vehicle ahead. She could feel his presence even without seeing him. The weight of his command pressed down like the darkness itself. Every mile they drove felt like a mile deeper into the grave she had dug for herself the moment the metal had glinted in the sun. His gaze stayed forward. She counted the bumps in the road, the turns, the incline of the hills, old habits, ones she thought she had abandoned. The Phantom Legion had drilled those reflexes into her. Always map your environment, even blindfolded. But she wasn't blindfolded now. She was watching, remembering, preparing. The vehicle slowed. Gravel crunched beneath heavy tires. They passed through a gate, floodlights sweeping across metal and concrete. The convoy rolled into a compound hidden against the mountain's ribs, remote, sterile, a place meant not for living but for containment. The door opened with a hiss of hydraulics. Stepped out, flanked by escorts. Her boots hit the ground softly, but the sound echoed in her chest like thunder. Sloane waited near the entrance, his hands folded behind his back. His eyes swept over her as though she were less a soldier and more a specimen. "Welcome," he said evenly. "You'll forgive the lack of ceremony. We don't treat phantoms as guests." She met his gaze with the same calm she had carried through fire. "Then don't treat me at all. Do what you came to do." A faint smirk tugged at his lips. "We will." The escorts led her inside. The compound's halls were bare, sterile concrete laced with fluorescent light that hummed overhead. No decorations, no insignia, just blankness, designed to strip away identity. Every step took her further into silence. They ushered her into a small chamber. A metal table, two chairs, a single light overhead. One wall was mirrored, the kind that revealed nothing on her side but hid eyes on the other. She didn't need to see them to know she was being watched. The soldiers left, the door locked. Minutes passed. She sat in stillness, fingers resting lightly on the table. She did not fidget. She did not shift. The Legion had trained her for worse, rooms where silence was a weapon, where waiting itself was interrogation. Finally, the door opened. Sloane stepped in, a file in hand. He sat across from her, laying the folder flat between them. His gaze was steady but sharp with hunger. He began, his tone measured. Born in the Western districts, enlisted at 20, assigned to logistics, vanished 2 years later, official record discharged, but we both know records can lie. He tapped the folder lightly, and then there's this. He slid a photograph across the table. It showed a group of soldiers, faces blurred by sensor bars except one. Hers. Younger, sharper, uniform black as shadow. A patch on her arm she hadn't seen in years. The Legion. Her throat tightened, but she gave no reaction. Silence had always been her shield. Sloane leaned back. You've lived two lives, the one in the records and the one the records erased. The fire at camp stripped away the first. Now I want the second. Her voice, when it came, was calm. Wanting doesn't mean you'll get it. He chuckled softly, shaking his head. Defiance, predictable, but you'll find I don't need your confession. I already have enough to prove the Legion wasn't wiped out. What I want is to know why you're still alive. His eyes bored into hers. Why you, when every other ghost was buried? His breath slowed. She had rehearsed this answer in her head 100 times. She had promised herself she would never give it. But here, under his gaze, the memories pressed harder. The mission that broke the Legion, the one they were never meant to survive, the flames, the silence after, the bodies, and the metal pressed into her hand by a dying commander who whispered words she could never forget. You live because someone has to. Her jaw clenched. She forced the memory back into the shadows. I'm alive, she said softly, because death didn't want me that day. That's all. Sloane studied her, searching for cracks. He found none. He opened the folder again, sliding more photographs across. Operations in nameless valleys, strikes in the dead of night, blurred images of soldiers who never officially existed. All redacted, all erased, Sloane murmured. But here you are, proof. His voice sharpened. Proof of what? That your government builds soldiers and discards them. That ghosts walk because no one bothered to bury them properly. For the first time, Sloane's smirk faltered. His eyes darkened. You think you're noble, he said coldly. But ghosts aren't noble, they're dangerous. And you've infected recruits with your presence. They see you as something more than you are. That cannot stand. Her lips pressed thin. So what do you plan to do? Break me? Parade me as an example? Sloane leaned forward, voice low. Exactly. The silence thickened, held his gaze, refusing to yield. Finally, Sloane stood. We'll continue this tomorrow. Ghosts may resist, but everyone breaks eventually. He left her alone, the door locking with a heavy clang. She sat in the silence, her chest tight. The memories clawed at her, unbidden. The Legion's last stand, her commander's dying words, the faces of those who never walked away. For years, she had buried them under silence. Now Sloane was digging them up, and she wasn't sure how long she could keep them buried. Far away, back at camp, the whispers had not died. Recruits gathered in secret corners, voices hushed but urgent. She saved us. She's Legion. She's one of us. Paced his office, fists tight at his sides. He could feel the shift. His presence had lit something inside the recruits, something command could not extinguish easily. If Sloane tried to bury her again, the camp would not forget her. Entered, face pale. Sir, the men are restless. They want answers. Some are even talking about demanding her release. Froze, that kind of talk was dangerous, treasonous, and yet he couldn't bring himself to shut it down. Because deep inside, he knew she had earned their loyalty in ways command never had. And loyalty like that didn't vanish, no matter how many medals you buried in shadows. Why was it always the silence that hurt the most? The room was colder tonight. The same metal chair, the same concrete walls, the same flickering light above her head. But now there was an edge to it, a precision designed not just to contain her but to scrape away at her calm. Sat with her hands resting lightly on her knees, every muscle taut, every breath measured. The door opened with a groan of steel. Colonel Sloane entered, not with anger but with something worse, calm calculation. He carried no folder this time, no photographs, only a glass of water which he placed in front of her with quiet intent. You haven't spoken much, he said softly, taking the seat across from her. But silence is its own language. It tells me you're afraid of words. That's interesting. His eyes stayed forward. She would not give him the satisfaction of reaction. Sloane leaned closer, his tone patient. The Legion taught you to endure, I respect that, But endurance alone doesn't erase guilt, and I see it in you. The way your eyes flicker when I mention the valley, when I speak of the last mission. Something broke there, something you carry. Her breath hitched before she could stop it. Sloane smiled faintly. There it is, the crack. The memory tore through her like shrapnel. Fire in the hills, radios dead, the sound of mortars falling closer than they should have. A scream swallowed by dust, and her commander pressing the metal into her palm with trembling fingers, whispering live, because someone has to. Gripped her knees, willing herself back into the sterile room, back into now. I won't dig into tactics, Sloane continued. That's not my interest. My interest is human. Why does a survivor choose to hide in ranks instead of claiming honor? Unless, of course, survival was a mistake. The words hung sharp. Survival mistake. His voice finally broke the silence, low but steady. You want to know why I didn't claim honor? Because honor doesn't resurrect the dead. It doesn't stop the faces from haunting you. It doesn't fill the silence left behind. Sloane's eyes narrowed. So you run from it. I live with it, she corrected. He studied her, quiet for a long beat. Then he rose, leaving the untouched water behind. We'll continue tomorrow. You'll speak more. They always do. The door shut. The lock clanged. She sat in the silence again, but this time her calm felt thinner, as though his words had stripped away one more layer. Back at the camp, the silence was no less heavy. Recruits worked by day, but at night they gathered in shadows, voices low but urgent. The fire had changed them, had changed them. She's one of us, whispered the boy she had saved, fists clenched at his sides. And they took her because of it. Others shifted nervously. You don't defy command. You know what happens if you do. But she saved our lives. She's Legion. The word cracked through the barracks like a spark. Some recoiled from it, others clung to it. Slowly, lines were being drawn, not by orders but by belief. Felt it, he saw it in their faces, in the way they hesitated when he gave commands, as though waiting to hear what would have said. Her absence was louder than her presence had ever been. He sat in his office late into the night, staring at the map pinned across the wall. Routes, supply chains, patrol schedules. He had spent his life obeying the chain of command, but something in him shifted the day she was taken. Entered quietly, closing the door behind him. His face was pale, but his voice carried weight. They're restless, Major. Some are talking about marching to the compound. They'll be slaughtered if they try. His jaw tightened, then keep them in line. I can't, admitted. Not without her. They don't trust me, they trust her. His hand pressed against the desk. His heart hammered with the truth he had been avoiding. The recruits had seen leadership in that no rank could manufacture, and Sloane had seen it too. That's why he had taken her. She can't stay there, murmured almost to himself. His eyes widened. Are you saying? Cut him off with a sharp look. I'm saying nothing, not yet, but start listening carefully. If Sloane pushes too hard, if he tries to break her publicly, this camp will ignite. And when it does, you and I will have to decide which side we're on. Swallowed hard but nodded. Inside the compound, nights bled into days. Sloane pressed harder, each session peeling at her silence. He shifted tactics, sometimes mocking, sometimes sympathetic, always probing. He dangled promises of freedom, then threatened isolation. But held barely. What broke her wasn't his words. It was the memories he unearthed. One session, he dropped a file on the table. Inside, photographs of the Legion's last mission, grainy but clear enough. Her squad in the valley, faces she hadn't seen in years, blurred by dust but unmistakable. You were there last, Sloane said quietly. The only one who walked away. Why did they choose you? Did you choose yourself? The photographs blurred through her tears before she could stop them. She blinked hard, forcing them back. I didn't choose. I never chose. Then why you? He pressed. The question echoed through her chest like a gunshot. Why me? The one question she could never answer. She left the room that day shaking, though she never let them see it. Back in her cell, she pressed the metal into her palm until the edges cut her skin. The same words echoed in her memory. Live because someone has to. But what if survival had been nothing more than luck? What if her living had stolen life from those who deserved it more? For the first time in years, felt the silence inside her threaten to break. Back at camp, the recruits gathered again in secret. The boy stood tall, voice trembling but fierce. We can't just leave her there. She carried us through fire. She deserves better than chains. Others muttered fearfully, but more than a few nodded. The whisper had become belief. Belief was becoming resolve. Stood outside the barracks, listening to their murmurs seep through the walls. He closed his eyes, the weight pressing heavier on his chest. He knew where this was heading. And he knew command would never allow to walk free. Not as a ghost, not as a legion, not as a leader who could outshine them all. Why did they bring her into the light only to drown her in it? The floodlights burned across the compound yard, their harsh beams washing everything in sterile white. Was marched out between two guards, wrists bound this time. She didn't resist, though each step struck like a drumbeat in her chest. The air was sharp, colder than the barracks she had been kept in. Soldiers lined the perimeter, silent, their faces drawn tight with unease. At the center of the yard, a single chair waited, metal, bolted down. Colonel Sloan stood nearby, hands clasped behind his back, his voice carrying across the crowd with calculated weight. Some of you have heard whispers, he began. Some of you believe them. Tonight I strip away rumor. Tonight you'll see the truth. The guards forced into the chair. Cold steel bit against her spine. She kept her eyes forward, refusing to meet Sloan's stare. He walked slowly, circling her as he spoke. This woman wears the face of a recruit, but she carries more than that. She carries a past erased by command itself, a past called the Phantom Legion. The name sent ripples through the crowd. Some shifted uneasily, others frowned, not fully understanding, but all listened. Sloan stopped in front of her, voice low but sharp enough to pierce. A ghost in your ranks, a survivor when survival should have been impossible. And what do ghosts bring if not danger? His jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Silence was her last weapon. Sloan crouched low, close enough that only she could hear. Say nothing, and I'll paint you as I choose. Speak, and you'll condemn yourself with your own words. Either way, you lose. He straightened, addressing the soldiers again. The Legion was not noble. They were tools, weapons made for shadows. When command no longer needed them, they were buried. Yet she remains. Ask yourselves why her and not the others? His chest clenched. She felt the eyes on her, curious, suspicious, afraid. Sloan was poisoning the silence she had always relied on. The boy from camp, barely out of training, eyes too young for the things he had seen, stepped forward from the crowd before anyone could stop him. His voice cracked but carried. Because she saved us. The words shattered the stillness. Sloan turned sharply, his expression curdling. Step back, soldier. But the boy stood his ground, trembling but resolute. When the fire hit, everyone froze. She didn't, she led. She pulled me out when I would burned. You weren't there, she was. Whispers surged across the yard. Sloan's jaw hardened. Lifted her chin at last, her voice steady though her throat ached. He's right. Gasps rippled. Her silence was broken. Sloan's eyes narrowed, triumph flickering, then fading when she continued. I didn't ask for it, I didn't want it, but I couldn't watch them die when I knew what to do. If that makes me dangerous, then so be it. But don't twist survival into shame. Her words cut through the yard like a blade, simple but raw. The recruits shifted, their eyes turning not to Sloan but to her. Standing at the edge of the formation, felt the ground shift. The balance of authority was tipping. Sloan had wanted to break her in front of them, but her defiance, quiet, unshaken, was burning brighter than his condemnation. Sloan's voice dropped into steel. You see what she does, she infects. She bends your loyalty. That is why ghosts must be buried twice. He raised a hand. The guards moved, gripping her shoulders, forcing her down harder into the chair. Restraints clicked into place around her wrists. "This ends now," Sloane said coldly. "You will sign a confession of your past. You will state that you misled the recruits, that your actions in the fire were reckless improvisation, nothing more. And then, perhaps, you will be allowed to vanish quietly again." His voice was low, steady. "I won't rewrite truth to make you comfortable." The defiance lit sparks in the crowd. Murmurs swelled, louder this time. Sloane's face darkened. He turned sharply toward, "Major, control your men or I will." His chest tightened. This was the line he had dreaded, the moment he could no longer remain still. His voice carried, clipped and strong. "They don't need controlling. They need answers. She's given them more truth in a fire than you've given them in a career." The yard froze. Sloane's eyes blazed. "Careful, Major. You tread dangerously close to insubordination." But didn't flinch. He stepped forward, standing between Sloane and his voice like iron. "If you want to bury her, you'll bury me too, because I was there. I saw what she did, and I won't call it reckless. I'll call it leadership." The recruits erupted in whispers, no longer afraid to hide their awe. Sloane's control was slipping. He barked at the guards, "Remove him." But no one moved. The guards hesitated, eyes flicking between command and conviction. The silence stretched, fragile, electric. His breath caught. She had never asked for this, never wanted them to risk themselves for her. But here it was, unfolding anyway, the thing she feared most, people believing in her when belief could only bring pain. Sloane's voice roared, desperate now. "You think this is loyalty? It's weakness. She will drag you down with her." His answer was quiet, but it carried farther than any shout. "Or she'll carry us through fire again." The yard shook with the weight of it. Sloane's face twisted with rage. He turned on his heel, snapping orders. "Lock her back in isolation. I'll deal with this insubordination myself." The guards dragged to her feet, but as she was marched away, her eyes met. For the first time since the fire, she let something show, gratitude, sharp and fleeting. Back in her cell, sat with her back against the wall, wrists raw from restraints. But inside, something shifted. The silence she had carried for years no longer belonged only to her. It belonged to them now, the recruits, even the boy who had dared speak against command. And though fear pressed heavy in her chest, hope flickered there too. She whispered into the empty room, words she hadn't spoken since the Legion fell. "They deserve better than ghosts." Far from the compound, under the cover of night, gathered a small circle of recruits. Their voices trembled, but their eyes were fierce. "If they try to bury her," said, "we won't stand down." The boy nodded hard, fists clenched. "She saved me once, I'll save her back." And in the shadows of the camp, resolve hardened. Sloane had wanted to make her silence a weapon, but all he had done was teach them that her voice mattered more than his. And once belief takes root, it doesn't stay hidden. It grows. Why do the final choices always come in silence, not shouts? The compound woke restless. Even before dawn, soldiers shifted uneasily, voices hushed but urgent. Rumors had spread like cracks in ice. Some said would be executed quietly before nightfall. Others claimed Sloane planned to transfer her to a black site where ghosts were buried without graves. No one knew the truth, but everyone knew one thing: time was running out. In her cell, sat with her back against the wall, metal pressed tight in her palm. She had not slept. Each hour had stretched thin, memory and fear intertwining until she could no longer tell which was heavier. The Legion's voices haunted her. Her commander's final whisper echoed louder than ever. Live, because someone has to. But now she wondered if living meant more than survival. Maybe it meant carrying, bearing weight, standing when silence could no longer hold. The door opened. 2 guards entered. One avoided her gaze, the other was rigid, jaw clenched. They motioned. "On your feet." She rose without a word. Her wrists were bound again. They led her through the sterile halls, every step echoing. At the end of the corridor, Sloane waited. His uniform was flawless, his face carved in cold resolve. "It ends today," he said evenly. He gestured and the convoy prepared. Not toward headquarters, not toward any tribunal, toward the ridge outside the compound, the place where erasures were finished. His chest tightened, but her stride never faltered. Back at the camp, stood before his recruits, face drawn, voice low but fierce. "They're taking her to bury what she is, what she represents. You don't have to follow me if you're afraid, but I can't stand by, not after what she's done for us." The boy stepped forward first. "She saved us, we save her." Others followed. One by one, a line of soldiers formed behind, no longer uncertain, not whispering now, deciding. His jaw set. He knew what this was: mutiny, treason. But he also knew it was the only way to honor what they had seen with their own eyes. The convoy wound its way up the ridge, engines growling low against the dawn. Sat inside, eyes fixed on the horizon. Light was breaking, gold spilling across jagged hills. It reminded her of the valley long ago, the mission that had shattered everything. Back then, the dawn had brought only silence and loss. But this dawn felt different. At the ridge's peak, the convoy stopped. Sloane stepped out first, boots crunching against gravel. He gestured and was pulled from the vehicle, marched forward to the edge where the earth dropped into shadow. "This is where ghosts vanish," Sloane said quietly, almost ceremonially. "The last trace of the Legion dies here." He raised a document, crisp and white. "Sign your confession. Admit fabrication. Admit you misled camp. Do this and I'll let you live quietly, erased but breathing. Refuse and you'll vanish as your comrades did." Looked at the paper, at Sloane's expectant eyes, at the guards waiting for her collapse. Her hands tightened. Her voice came low, steady, but with a weight that carried farther than any shout. "You've mistaken me, Sloane. I don't fear vanishing. I've lived as a ghost for years. What I fear is dishonoring the ones who never walked away. Signing your paper would make their silence meaningless, and I won't do that." Sloane's jaw hardened. "Then you've chosen death." "No," said softly, "I've chosen dignity." Before he could respond, a sound rose from the road below: boots, engines, voices. Sloane turned sharply. Dust lifted against the dawn. A line of figures marched toward the ridge. At the front, recruits at his side. The camp moving as one. Sloane's face darkened. "Stop them." The guards hesitated, their rifles lifted but not firmly. Saw at the fracture, fear but also doubt. His voice cut through the distance, iron strong. "You bury her, you bury us, everyone." The recruits echoed, voices rough, unpolished but united. "Every one." The words struck harder than weapons. Sloane's hand clenched into a fist. His authority, absolute hours ago, trembled in the face of something he couldn't command: belief. Stood taller, chains rattling against her wrists. Her voice carried steady across the ridge. "You wanted to erase me, but you can't erase what they've already seen. Fire doesn't ask permission to burn, neither does truth." The silence that followed was suffocating. Sloane's eyes flicked from her to the recruits behind him. The weight of mutiny pressed heavy. He could order bloodshed. He could try to silence them all. But he knew what that would mean: civil fracture, rebellion, a story too loud to bury. Slowly, reluctantly, he lowered the paper. His voice was bitter but tight. "This isn't the end. Ghosts always return to ash." He turned, signaling the convoy. The guards released her wrists, uncertain, glancing between her and. In the tension, Sloane retreated. The convoy rolled back down the ridge, dust swallowing their retreat. Stood in the dawn light, wrists raw, heart unsteady. Approached, his face grim but softened at the edges. The recruits gathered behind him, their eyes fixed on her, not with fear now, not even with awe, with loyalty. She looked at them all, her voice low, almost breaking. "I never wanted this. I never wanted to lead again." The boy's voice came, soft but sure. Maybe not, but sometimes we don't choose who carries us. Sometimes we just follow the one who stands when no one else will. His throat tightened. She pressed the metal into her palm, feeling its weight cut into her skin. For years it had been a burden. Now it felt like something else, responsibility. She lifted her gaze to the recruits, the camp, the faces that had seen her not as a ghost, but as something living. Her voice was quiet, but it carried across them all. I won't speak often. I won't promise glory. But if silence is all I have left, then let it be the kind that protects, not hides. The dawn rose higher, burning the ridge in gold. The camp stood together, no longer fractured, no longer whispering, was no longer invisible. She was seen. And in being seen, she was no longer just surviving, she was living. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.